This is my audience. Stephanie, that way. I apologize ahead of time. You may be at the stage in your life right now where you are just walking into the college world. You may be at the stage in your life where you've been here and you know how this works. For all of you returning to college, you know exactly where I'm coming from, because you have been here and you have seen it firsthand. I want to persuade students to not drink, to stay focused, and to keep their eye on the prize. There are too many students getting busted for drinking while on campus, or getting an OWI, which is ruining their chances at ever making it in the world. I personally know a handful of students who fell into the party scene and had to transfer schools because they got kicked out for drinking. I know this is a big stage in our lives, and the choices we are faced with are everyday things. I want to remind you that alcohol is serious, and that when you mix alcohol and decisions, you are mixing your choices that are altered, and then they suffer the consequences. I want to remind you it's not what everyone cracks it up to be. Your friends may be doing it and say they love the feeling of being drunk or buzzed, but then what they don't tell you is the next day that you feel horrible because you're hungover. And if you're not careful, you can consume too much because normally you don't drink and you might not know that you have certain limits. And that could lead to you getting your stomach pumped to save your life. They don't tell you the long nights and the crappy mornings they suffer throwing up and being hungover the night before. If I can get you to walk away remembering one thing today, remember this. If you decide to drink, please don't ever drive. You need to phone a friend or a loved one and have them come pick you up. Designate a driver before you start drinking, and make sure it's someone you can trust so that you don't ever drink alone. Here's why. Nearly 11,000 people a year are involved in fatal car accidents. Everyone thinks this won't happen to me, or it's not going to happen. But in reality, it does. Reality is you're just one drink away of ruining your life. This could change your life, and what you do in a matter of minutes or an hour could forever change your life. On June 25th, I got a phone call at 6 a.m. in the morning that changed my life forever. We were phoned from my uncle and told that my cousin was found laying on the side of the road, and he was found in a car that was pretty much totaled out, and that we didn't really know what had happened. It was a pretty serious accusation. They said that they took him to the hospital, and they said he was way too severe, so they were going to rush him to Iowa City to find out what was going on. He was rushed to Iowa City and was basically kind of in like an ICU, and we drove up that day. And I called into work, and all of our family members did what they could to be up there. My aunt and uncle went up right away with my cousin, and then my dad, myself, my grandparents, and my uncle followed up in a separate car once we got the call. We figured they needed our love and support more than anything in the world, because at this point, we didn't really know what was going to happen. I remember sitting there that day at 6 in the morning being tired as all heck, but not being able to sleep. I remember the look on my dad's face when he got the phone call. I remember him sitting there, his voice cracking up, and him looking at me saying, "Your cousin's in a coma, we don't know if he's going to make it." These are serious things that come from drinking, and if you're not smart, they can happen to you. My cousin was up there for a number of days. The first day we went up, he was in his coma. We sat there hour by hour waiting. We were probably there for a total of 8 hours. The first time we went in, everybody, like my aunt and uncle, weren't allowed to have anybody in there for a while because they had just gotten there. So we all sat in the waiting room and listened to the sad stories that surrounded us. We noticed that in the time of being there, that the waiting game was going to be our new thing. We knew that no matter how bad you wanted to see him, you had to wait until you got the okay. So we waited and waited, and my aunt and uncle came out, and finally the doctor said it was okay to send people in. My grandma got up right away and went with my dad to go see him. I remember sitting there waiting with my uncle and my cousin, and they said he's pretty bad. For me, pretty bad thought, he's a little scuffed up, he's pretty beat up, he'll pull through, he's a strong kid. But when my grandparents, like my grandpa wouldn't go in, he couldn't take it. After seeing him in the room, he just walked away. But seeing my grandma, who is one of the strongest people in my life, and my dad, who rarely ever cries, come out bawling, was one of the hardest things I've ever had to experience. Seeing the look on their face reassured me that he was a strong kid, but this is a really tough situation for him to pull through on. Later on that day, the doctor came out and said she wanted to talk to us and tell us about his condition. He had broken his eye socket, he had broken all the bones in the front of his face, and he disaligned his jaw, disattached it from his skull. So basically they said that he was either going to need pins to hold his face together, or he was going to need to get his jaw wired shut, also that he could just do normal things like eating and drinking and talking. We basically went in. I asked if I could go see him then, and I went in there, and he was just laying there with cords everywhere. He had tubes in his throat. He was on a respirator that was breathing for him. We talked to him for a while. My aunt sat there, and he's a big skier, and he's made a very big impression on a lot of people, and she sat there and told him to just reach for the mountains where he wants to be. And we walked out, and we were getting ready to pack up because we didn't think much was going to happen. And before you know it, he went back in to say goodbye, and I was holding his hand telling him he's the strongest kid I know. And as those words came out of my mouth, he squeezed my hand and woke up. This is one of the most emotional times in my life that I've ever experienced. It was one of the hardest things that I think anyone should ever have to go through at this age. He pulled through. They did a quick exam of his body, and they said that he was actually pretty good, besides the fact that he broke his eye socket, and that in his head it was pretty messed up. He had obviously a concussion. He had some disaligned muscles. His jaw was pretty much broken. He had some pretty serious damage. So we went home after we found out he was okay, and to this day he is still recovering. He's had his jaw wired shut twice, and he had his lip cut open. He had above his forehead cut open, and they put plates in his face. Well, when he was having the surgery, it was supposed to be a 2-hour surgery, and it turned into a 7-hour surgery. And the next day he woke up and he started to lose his vision. After that, they went back and had emergency surgery. The whole time that he had his surgery, he actually had a trachea put into his throat, and they cut a hole in it. After that, the next day, they realized that they needed to go back in and reopen everything and re-put in the plates, or he would never be able to do functional things again. So he had another surgery, which was another 8 or 9 hour surgery, and things were going good. A couple days later, he went back up and got his jaw wired shut for 6 weeks. To this day, I think he's actually getting his jaw opened a little bit, so he can talk a little bit. Last week was the first time he's had real food since the incident happened. He's doing pretty good. Health-wise, he's fighting. He's getting stronger. Legally, not so good. For me, this whole thing has opened my eyes. If you're going to drink with people, you need to make sure you're with people that are going to protect you and keep you safe. For him, his ordeal was not as fortunate for him. He was left on the side of the road to die. So I just want you to remember, next time you decide to drink and drive, that you take someone with you and you have them drive instead. Be smart if you're going to drink. Be with people who are going to take care of you. Thank you.